Drake or Beyonce, do they need a publicist?
They definitely 100% need a publicist, which is why she does the Super Bowl. It's a publicist who is behind and working closely with the team.
These guys that are just going around taking photos of Justin Bieber, and as a publicist, you can't do anything.
I mean, you can tell them to stop, but that doesn't mean that they're going to stop. I love Jessie Reyez so much. She was like one of the first artists that I worked with when I was at Island Records. Eventually being Grammy nominated, her voice was different and she would wear chucks and like denim shorts and like an oversized shirt and like, go out there on the stage with her guitar and like kick ass.
Kanye, recently he's been going on like a Twitter rant with every sort of launch he has.
Some people, it's hard to accept some of the like wild things that he's, been doing or like tweets. I'm doubtful that there's a team that's behind this. I think it's probably just something that he is pushing himself. Hi, how are you?
That's like pretty good. Shan, how are you? How's things on your end?
Pretty busy actually. Like I feel like things have picked up. I feel like there was like a window of like at the end of last year when things were a bit slower. And then like all of a sudden things just got really crazy and really busy really fast. And so I mean it's a good thing, but it's been busy.
Whereabouts are you based?
I'm in New York. What about you?
Sydney, Australia.
Wow, okay.
Is it starting to get warm or is it still pretty cold over there?
So the weather's like in the like bipolar stage where it's like warm one day and then like freezing cold the next day. It's so crazy because Saturday I went for a run and in this park, it's like in my neighborhood. And I started maybe like 1 o'clock. By like 2 o'clock or two, it was 2:30, it was already like in the 30s and like it had gone from like 60 to like 30 really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you been in New York your whole life? Is that where you grew up?
No, so I'm originally from Memphis. I've been in New York a little over 10 years.
Okay. Interesting. And Sharon, how I first found out about you, I think I saw all the amazing cool PR work that you've been doing. How'd you get into the PR sort of space?
So, in college, I went into college and I was a pre-med major and I was always a pretty good student. I was always like up on my studies and very focused. And I started to notice like that my grades were like dropping a bit and I just wasn't as focused and passionate about my studies as I was in the past. And so, in college, that's the time to like explore. I feel like, growing up in Memphis or any of your like respective towns that you grow up in, you are in the bubble, it's kind of people who grew up in that city. And then when you go to college, it's like a melting pot of people from all over, you get to interact and build relationships with people from different backgrounds and people who are studying different things and who have different interests like outside of school too. And then you also start to like discover yourself. And I feel like that's kind of the phase that I was in. And so I noticed that my interests and my like hobby started to change. And I started like really getting into like blogging and Tumblr was really big. And so I felt like Tumblr was like a alternate like universe. And so like you could just find inspiration from, just like travel and fashion and music and just like cool stuff. Like I feel like all the cool kids were like on Tumblr, like just like they're like highlight reels. And so I immersed myself fully into Tumblr and I noticed that like I really, got into like fashion and music and entertainment. And so it was a tough decision for me, but I took a year off from school to like kind of just rediscover, who I was and kind of test out some of those interests that I had. And so during that year off, I launched a bow tie company. And it's kind of random how it came about. I remember like in college, there was a party and I think the theme or attire was like bow ties and blazers or something. That's when people wore like the professional attire to the clubs or, to the parties. They would be in blazers and loafers and their ties and bow ties. Um, and I, wanted to stand out. And I remember I like was like scouring the internet, like looking for different like prints of bow ties or different like fun colors, and I couldn't find anything. And so I was like, why don't I start my own like bow tie line of like eclectic, fun colors and prints and just like, try different things. And I remember my thing was I'm like, women get to go and they shop and there's so many different fun prints and patterns and like the men they just have like black tie, blue tie, um, and like the occasional like paisley print. I just felt like there was nothing really fun then. And so I was like maybe 20, 19, 20, and I just through my own research, I found a manufacturer who was based in New York. And I came up here and I met with the manufacturer and I developed my bow tie line from there. And I sold it in stores and like malls in Memphis. And I did like a couple of events and I would fly back and forth to New York and do like pop-up experiences and different events during New York Fashion Week. And during that time I also like I knew I wanted to go back to school. Like that was one of my goals. And so I was doing a lot of research of like what could I study that kind of combined these like new worlds that I was interested in, those new worlds being like fashion, music, entertainment. And I came across public relations. And so just through my research, I, discovered that in PR you could work corporate PR, you could do music PR, entertainment PR, film and TV PR, fashion PR. And so it was kind of just like a diverse range of like areas that you could focus on, but it gave me something to kind of hone in on. And so I transferred schools. I left the school that I was initially attending and I transferred to my hometown school and I studied public relations there. And so that was kind of my first taste of PR. And from there, I did like internships. I graduated like a year later. And then I moved to New York. And I fell in love with New York like in high school. I came here for a trip in high school. And then, of course, coming back and forth for the my bow tie line at the time, I just really became like obsessed with the New York culture and just like the different people and the opportunities that were here. And so I moved here. Now it's over 10 years ago.
And then what happened to the bow tie company? Did you keep it going? What year was that in? Did you sell it? Did you just stop doing it?
So the bow tie line, that had to be around 2011, 2012. Yeah, around that time. I just kind of like stopped doing it to focus on school. And then also, I mean, if I could go back, like I would have continued. And like I said, it was new for me. I didn't have any type of like business manager or any type of guidance. It was all super new. But if I could go back, I definitely would have like continued it. I just kind of stopped altogether. One of my reasons at the time was I felt like my own personal style was changing. I wasn't, and then also I've just felt like, like naturally with as time moved on, like we kind of moved away from the whole like preppy kind of like style, and people weren't the thrift culture had kind of died a little bit, where people were like thrifting and like wearing blazers to the clubs and like to college parties. I feel like that was kind of dying, and I felt like since my style was changing or evolving, like it just didn't feel authentic at the time. But you know what? Like now that I know better, like I definitely would have continued because I don't feel like, your style has to necessarily match what brand you're trying to push out or what brand that's tied to you. So I just, yeah, like I said, I just kind of ended it.
Interesting. Have you seen Timothée Chalamet's all his recent fits as he's promoting the new movie of him as Bob Dylan?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
even like the yellow moment at the Oscars, very bold, like, but I love it. It's also like a bold color, but just as far as like silhouette, I feel like kind of simple, honestly. But he still stands out so much. or even like the Chrome Hearts look. I don't know what award he was accepting, but like I feel like he's been definitely playing with fashion and trying some like daring looks, which I feel like they work for him for sure.
Yeah, like from a PR standpoint, like is he intentionally working with a stylist and asking for very loud sort of outfits to sort of get on TikTok, get on social? Is it intentional? How intentional is it? Like for example, I remember there was a period maybe around when Brad Pitt was breaking up with Angelina Jolie, where he was just rocking these crazy outfits and everyone was just like, whoa, like he had a new haircut. And apparently, like, that distracted everyone from like the whole sort of divorce situation. Are these sort of outfits intentional for PR?
You know what? I don't know if the intention is to like dress in loud outfits or like these outfits that are, but I think the intention is probably to experiment with fashion more and to possibly build relationships with certain brands and certain fashion houses. I can see that being an intention. And I mean, he's on like this big media tour, like global media tour. And so, I can see him like working closely with the stylist and his team, like coming together to, make sure each look makes sense and that, he's photographed and on those like best dress lists. And like I said, like he's building relationships with those designers and creative directors and stylists.
See. And when he's going on this sort of campaign PR tour for the movie, who's the one that's suggesting him to go on like a podcast with Theo Von, get interviewed by Nardwuar? Is he asking for these interviews? Is there like a person that's PR that's setting these up? Usually, what's happening behind the scenes when someone goes on a PR sort of run to promote anything?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't speak, for him and his team and, exactly how, their system is set up. But normally a publicist is collaborating with the artist, whether it's an actor or a musician and their team to like strategically come up with what makes the most sense for that artist. And a lot of times these artists, they do have goals themselves or like places that they're like, oh, this podcast is cool. Like, I'd love for the team to reach out. Or sometimes, like, someone as big as a Nardwuar, like, they'll DM an artist or, an actor or whoever. And if that person is, has a authentic, like, connection to what work they've been doing, like, it could happen like that and they'll connect them with the team. But a publicist is definitely usually the one who, like, any media opportunities normally flow through the publicist at some point if they aren't the ones who organized it from the beginning.
Interesting. And do publicists usually email or DM just through their publicist account, or would they jump onto the artist account to sort of get the message seen?
No, you would like do your own outreach.
Mm,
I think as far as social media, sometimes different artists have, people who run their social accounts, but that's a case by case basis. Like some artists, they like to put their own post up and engage themselves. And I think it depends on the artist and, what they're into. Some artists, don't really like to lean into social media and it's just not their thing. But like if they need to promote projects, they have someone who could get those posts up for them. And I think that person would be like a social media consultant or, a digital marketing person or
got it. And I guess like as a publicist or the social media coordinator, like just a hypothetical, that person could email Joe Rogan and be like, "Hey, I'm representing, say, Timothée Chalamet, and he would love to be on your show. Would you be interested?" And just hope your PR email sort of gets seen in his inbox.
yeah, and like it's all about the pitch, making the pitch stand out and like your subject line. And also, I think a big part of it is the publicist having relationships with these um, outlets or platforms or publications, or maybe, for Joe Rogan, there's a producer who books the Joe Rogan podcast. So making sure that you have a relationship with that producer. And sometimes, it's all about just like research. And like I said, everything's about strategy. So figuring out if that podcast would even be a great look for the specific artist or the particular artist that you're working with. It's all just like case by case basis. There's no like template for it. I feel like, everything is super tailored to that particular artist's like needs or goals. And when I say artists, I'm referring to creatives in general, actors, musicians, performing artists, visual artists. I'm just referring to artists in general.
Perfect. Thanks, Cheyenne, for the clarification. When it comes to like building relationships, like let's say a person's getting into sort of the PR world, and they might have a friend that is producing a podcast. They might know a writer for GQ, but that's it. They don't know anyone else. How would you recommend them go about sort of building more relationships, whether it's, wanting to get more outlets, more podcasts? How does one start that from nothing?
So, I think in the beginning, like in my case, I started as an intern. And so I was able kind of to slowly learn. And I had amazing people who I worked under who were great teachers, and a lot of things and, a lot of those lessons stuck with me throughout the years. But, if you are in your career and you want to pivot, I think it's about finding a great mentor, doing research, and also just like reaching out to people. If you're working with a client and you come across an article that may have a similar story or a similar artist who has a similar background to a client that you're working with, and you're like, oh, this writer wrote about X, Y, and Z. This could make sense for, this client. And you may not necessarily have a relationship with that writer. And so normally it's just a simple email, or even now like DMs, and if they're in your city, hey, I'm so and so. I work for this company, or I work for myself. I'm working with, X, Y, and Z artists or actors or musicians or this brand, or whatever the case may be. And you just like, hey, would love to grab coffee, would love to grab lunch, would love to grab dinner, a drink, whatever. And that's how you like, slowly start to build those relationships. Also, like over the years, a lot of writers, I mean, some of them stay in the same place, a lot of them are jumping around, moving around, but like you start to recognize names, and you familiarize yourself with those names. And if the industry is pretty small, so you could be out at events or, whatever, and you run into them, or shows or red carpets, and you just start to like see each other a lot. And so you naturally start to like build those relationships. But I think back to your point, to start, I think that's kind of, if you don't have the opportunity to intern somewhere, which interning is always an amazing start, just like reach out to someone who you would like to model yourself after, I guess, or even if you don't want to do the exact thing that they did, or, if there's something that, you've looked at their career path or their career trajectory, and you're like, oh, this was super cool, or this person is working with these cool clients. Let's reach out to them and just, ask for a lunch or coffee, pick their brain, ask questions. I think that's like a great start.
And even once you've sort of built that network and those relationships, let's say you sort of onboard a new client, you have a story, you maybe have 10 people in mind that could potentially write something about this story. Is it still a numbers game, or are you pretty sort of targeted with your approach where you're confident you can sort of get something written up?
So, I mean, the landscape, I'm sure like the landscape of media, especially here in the States, has changed a lot. We're unfortunately, seeing a lot of magazines and print magazines, like they're being like closed down left and right. And as far as like the news here, the news is being attacked. Like a lot of like DEI efforts are being rescinded. And I think, it's a tough time for media, and a lot of writers now are Whereas in like back in in like 10 years ago or 10, 15 years ago, there were so many blogs and opportunities for new artists and people who wanted to discover new talent. Now, celebrity culture kind of drives a lot of things. And this landscape has just changed so much that you have to be really strategic about timing and when you want certain press moments to take place. And I mean, you specifically mentioned write-ups. Normally, if you have a target, you go to that priority target and you reach out to that outlet or that writer. And if they're unable to do it or they're not, they just don't have the bandwidth or they're not specifically interested in that particular pitch, and then you go to another writer who you think would be interested, and you just keep trying until you're able to achieve that goal.
Got it, I see. And Cheyenne, over the last 6 months, I know that you sort of used to be at Interscope. That was your last place. What's been your main focus over the last 6 to 12 months?
So I was at Interscope up until the beginning of 2024. Interscope, well, the music industry in general, they shuffled around a lot of people and layoffs, like massive layoffs happened at the beginning of last year. And unfortunately, I was in the number that was cut. After the layoffs, I took some time to just kind of figure out exactly what I wanted to do next and take some time to myself to kind of just process everything. And for the past like 6 months, I've been freelancing, consulting, doing like contract work with artists, a lot of independent artists, which has been fun. And like it's a very new world for me because I've been at the record labels for the past 6.5, 7 years. But there's some real excitement and some amazing talent out here. And so I've just had to utilize my relationships throughout the years, people who I've artists who I've worked with, former colleagues, friends now, industry friends, just reaching out to them to, if they're at a company, seeing what projects they're working on, seeing if they need, extra hands anywhere. Because, like I said, the layoffs happened, and I know, those artists have to have some PR point person. So, yeah, that's kind of what I've been up to. Is just like setting up those meetings, those calls, and working with some amazing new talent and some amazing independent, even some artists who aren't new, but they're just independent or they've recently gone independent. And then also some artists who are signed to some major labels too that I've worked with. So yeah, things have been picking up this year, and I'm super excited for the rest of 2025 for sure.
I remember I was introduced to this lady who does PR. I think she was freelancing. And I guess in the PR world, there's no guarantees, right? Like, I think she was talking about how even though she has all the connections and knows the different types of people, we can write up a story, figure out an angle, pitch it to people that she has in her contacts, and obviously no guarantees. And if it doesn't work, we'll rejig it, find a different angle, different story. And I think she was just sort of charging like a monthly retainer. Is that, I guess, the PR world in a nutshell? Is that sort of what it looks like?
Yeah, I think with PR, it's tricky because there are no real guarantees. As far as like, oh, I can 100% get you like Vogue cover, you know what I mean? Like, or I can guarantee that you'll be at the Met Ball this year. Like, I think there are steps and you have to like I think it goes back also to like tailoring the like goals or like targets to whatever like client you're working with. And as much as you try, sometimes you can like beat down a door, kick down a door, and like sometimes if this particular outlet doesn't have any interest, you go to the next door and you beat down the next door, and you just keep doing that until you convince someone. And I think a lot of times, PR has to work in tandem with other moments that are happening. So we work very closely with marketing. So if it's like, do you have any like big marketing moments happening? Um, are there any like big personal moments happening in your life that we could kind of use as, a moment to tie in some kind of like lifestyle components? Is there a brand deal in the works? Like I kind of, it's not just as simple as um this is a product that you're trying to push or sell. It's a full experience, and I think it's about more than just a product, you know?
Gotcha. And like you mentioned, sort of cover of Vogue, get into the Met Ball. Could like an artist just focus on his or her crafts, grow his or her following, not have a PR person, and then have Vogue reach out to them and be like, hey, we really like the stuff you've been doing. Would you like to be on our cover? Or would you come to our Met Ball? Is that common? Or is it much, much more common to have the Vogue cover happen because of a PR person?
You know what? I think it does happen for sure. I think there are some people who are really passionate. People who get into this industry are usually really passionate about it. Like they really love music. You know, if they work at Vogue, they probably, they really love fashion you know, and depending on which department at Vogue they work for, like if they're in entertainment, they usually are like really excited about discovering like new talent. And so if they're, just online and they're surfing the web or they're scrolling TikTok or Instagram and they see a artist on a red carpet or a person on a red carpet and they're like, "Oh my God, I love the way they're dressed," or "This person looks cool," or they're trying something different and their campaign is really cool. And they start to follow that artist and there's some kind of like personal connection. I think it does happen where they reach out directly. A publicist, though, normally has a direct contact with that person who would do that, and so or a strong relationship, and so they kind of know, how to message things, and they kind of know how to, package it together nicely and deliver it. I think it's amazing to have a publicist, no matter where you are in your career, because even if it's, you're not necessarily ready for a magazine cover or to do a performance on Fallon show or this podcast, there may be some messaging or narrative or things that you kind of miss that a publicist just has a different lens on, and they can kind of help weave that through your story from the beginning until you have this awareness and visibility.
Interesting. Could you share like a random example on a story that is pretty generic? And then I guess how you would go ahead and reweave it in a way that does get through to the target you're trying to target.
So I don't know if I think maybe let me know if this doesn't answer your question, but like right now I'm working with this female producer turned like music. She's a turned artist. She's pushing a project. She has a mixtape coming in this summer, I think in June. She just released a song last Friday, and her project is like super female heavy, a lot of female collaborations. Project really feels like super diverse. She's working with like other producers, other amazing female producers, amazing artists from like all over the world. And the music's great, and she has some amazing stats. And so, that's something that we could use to kind of help push the narrative and as a solid talking point. But then also, with the music, she has two songs coming out in March, and it's Women's History Month, and March 8th is International Women's Day. So it's kind of like weaving those like moments that are happening into what she already has naturally been doing. She's always been about like female empowerment and like kick-ass, like badass women. And so I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yes, thank you, Cheyenne.
Yeah, of course.
Within that example, I guess what would be your target outlets? And like, let's say you get it on some very popular sort of publication. How does that compare to her just going all in on TikTok, Instagram, posting a ton of reels, collabing with other sort of social media creators just by DMing them? Because that could probably, like one viral video could get you millions of views, but like an article can't, right?
It all has to work together. I think in order for an artist to be successful, you want to kind of be able to touch all of those areas. So you definitely want to have that social media aspect, a strong like social media presence and like those collaborations with creators and like you mentioned. But then also, there are those strong like I said, I think we don't want to lose, good journalism and good writing and there's a strong like piece that could come with, one of the like big women's outlets, like people who really focus on or outlets and writers that really focus on like feminism and female empowerment and female producers who, are often like overlooked. And so I think you would, kind of talk with the team and figure out, what moments make the most sense, whether it's a Vogue or Harper's Bazaar or an Elle or a Refinery 29 or, some of the like more women focused outlets or even like, if it's, something, if you want to take it like to a business side and do like a Wall Street Journal type of piece or just depends on exactly the pitch and what you're trying to put out there.
Yeah, because I can definitely see the value in sort of getting an article or story written on like any of those ones that you just mentioned, or like a Vogue, Forbes, Variety, GQ. I guess anything other than those, where there isn't like a brand name that people can know the outlet from, anything else but those, like it's probably not really worth it, is it? Because let's say you get your story written on abcmusic.com. I don't know, I just made that up. And let's say it gets like 100 hits, 100 people view it just through their subscription list or their Gmail. Like you can easily get 100 views just doing a TikTok, right?
Yeah, but it
Or
may
is
not be the
it?
same. It may not be the same 100 people. And
Uh,
so even though
uh,
you're only getting 100 people, 100 people count. Like,
mm,
that adds to your fan base. And then you also can, I guess you're saying like those smaller outlets or like,
mm,
they may not have necessarily a bigger audience, but you could use those as tools to like,
mm.
try to lock in those bigger moments because, straight out the gate you may not get a Rolling Stone piece. You know what I mean? So those smaller blogs are super important in helping to build the narrative. Like they're not throwaway blogs. Like they're super important. And honestly, I wish there were more. Like I mentioned, I feel like a lot of, media is celebrity driven, whereas in like years ago, people were just kind of into like this is real raw talent and like I really want to get behind this artist and help tell the narrative and push the story. And then a lot of times, you work with the outlet because they do have social media. And so you want to push and promote that article or whatever it is across socials and have the artist repost it. And like I said, it all works together to just kind of create this big moment.
What did I say? That makes so much sense. In the sort of PR publicist world, like who's like the biggest publicist in the world? Like who's sort of like the best of the best and what makes them so good?
I don't know, like, the best of the, I mean, I do know like some amazing publicists, of course, who work with some of the like biggest stars in the world. But instead of like saying like the best of the best, I can tell you personally who like are publicists who I've looked up to for years. And one would be Chris Chambers, who he started the Chamber Group, which was my first job here. He's worked at all the labels. He's been around forever. He's worked with artists from now he's working with Usher and he's worked with Erykah Badu and Mariah Carey and Lil Wayne and Future and Solange and Drake and Kelly Rowland. So many amazing, so incredible talent. And he's been a great mentor to me actually. And I've learned so much from him, like especially during my time, at the Chamber Group and even after. And I feel like he's someone who's like always there and like I admire his career and all the amazing work that he's done over the years.
That makes sense.
So
And then
him and there's Yvette Noel-Schure, who is Beyonce's publicist. So I mean, arguably, I guess she would be one of the biggest publicists in the world. I mean, she works with one of the, if not the biggest artists in the world. who's these are all Black publicists too, which is super important to me because we're often like underrepresented in the space. And so I'm very inspired by these individuals. She's done some amazing work. She's been at the record label. She's worked with incredible talent from Beyoncé to Destiny's Child, Prince, John Legend, like incredible talent. And these are publicists who I find to be very inspirational, super dedicated, passionate, hardworking, smart, very smart. And just by watching them, you learn so much. Luckily, I was able to work with Chris and work under Chris, and I've been to different panels and have worked alongside, well, not directly for Yvette, but like we've been in the same rooms, and so yeah, those are two amazing publicists. And if you don't know them, you should definitely like look them up and do their research. They're like the OGs in the game for sure.
Thanks for sharing that, Shy.
Yeah.
When you're sort of working with Chris Chambers and getting mentored by him, does like all the clients you mentioned, as a publicist, is he seeing them in person, working with them side by side, or is everything done over email and he's just connecting them to, say, Rolling Stone, and or is he actually with them?
No, you're seeing them, you're like with them.
Hmm.
You're a part of, you're immersed in it, fully immersed in it. Um, it's a lot of work is done on email with like the media and like any contacts that you may have, or if you're setting up a red carpet, X, Y, and Z, and or if they're launching a product or an album or whatever it may be, you're in touch with them directly. You're tossing ideas back and forth, and you're with them in person for any like events, or you definitely want to spend time with whatever client you're working with. I feel like that's kind of the secret sauce to building an authentic campaign that feels true to that client. It's like actually spending time with that client and knowing that client. So yeah, you're hand in hand for sure.
With like a red carpet, like the Oscars or the Grammys, from the outside, it just looks like I thought, the artist just shows up, talks to whoever wants to interview them, go to sit in their seat, and that's it. But I guess a lot more goes behind the scenes. I'm assuming everything from what they wear, being intentional with what they wear, having the publicist point out who they should get interviewed by and talk to. I guess, yeah, tell me a bit of like, what does it look like behind the scenes? Because from the outside, it just looks like the artist just shows up.
Oh, no. It's a whole process. It's normally mayhem behind the scenes, but it's a publicist's job to make it look and easy and make it, feel like it's a breeze for that client to like get through the carpet, because it can be very nerve-wracking and it's very chaotic and it moves really fast. And a carpet like the Grammys or the Oscars or like Met Gala, those are huge carpets. And so there's a lot of media, a lot of photographers, and you want to make sure that you're like hitting all of your marks. And so normally it's a publicist gets there way before their client, and they kind of scope the scene and kind of get feelers for what publications are out there on the carpet, who it makes the most sense, what time do we have, because like if you have an artist who is doing the Grammys carpet but they have to like present the first award, or they need to get their interviews done, get their photos taken, get to their trailer or whatever it is, and like go through glam touch-ups or whatever they may need if they're doing an outfit change, and then get to the stage, be there, be on on their mark when it's time for the cameras to roll. And so it's a full thing, and you work closely with production, you work closely with the artist manager, and you just have to have all of your like I's dotted and T's crossed, and you just have to be very on it and like thinking really fast, thinking really quickly. And make sure you go to like if there's a walkthrough, like normally if you do a big carpet, there's a walkthrough where someone from the Grammys or Oscars or I mean, usually it's like a group of people who kind of walk you through the flow of the night. And so making sure that you just like know the flow of the night like the back of your hand, so that like if anything last minute comes up, you don't have to worry about the flow of the night because you know the flow of the night. Now you can kind of like handle whatever else is going on.
And what happens if the publicist has two or three different clients, artists at the same show? How are they handling that?
So, I mean, it's happened to me so many times where like normally I try to time. So, depending on what the artist has going on, like if they're actually a part of the show, if they aren't, like you figure out what time makes sense. Like if you know the window of the carpet, if the carpet's from 7 to 8:30 or 7 to 9 or whatever, which is kind of late, but I'm just putting out a time. But if you have this window of time, you figure out what time makes the most sense for that particular artist to arrive. And, you're in constant contact with the other team or, the other artist's team. And if there's any overlap, you make sure you have like someone on standby just in case you need them to like grab one of the artists and kind of help you out. And normally for those carpets, they have talent handlers, people who are on the carpet just to kind of assist you. And so if you need someone to like, can you stand here with this artist while I run to this artist and make sure they're doing, X, Y, and Z interview or making sure that they get their photos taken or let me make sure they get to the stage. It's a full team and there's a whole machine that's in place and you just have to make sure everything's like well oiled and people are in place and you're in communication with your teams. So if you have multiple artists, you have to be in constant communication with all of their teams and try to make sure as best as you can that there's no overlap. But if it happens, so if it happens, you just have to be, ready to roll with that, have your backup in place, and that's it.
Wow. And these shows, how much percent of the guest list is from the show itself inviting that guest versus the guest having a publicist reaching out to the event and be like, hey, can I bring my sort of client to your sort of event?
So you mean how much is like direct outreach and then how much is it, what's the percentage of direct outreach from the production versus like the publicist pitching the production?
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, I don't know the exact percentage, but like I would say, you definitely they normally producers have an idea of kind of what artists they want to go after and
Hmm.
they'll do some outreach, but there may be artists who, may fit particular part of the show, or there are things that are happening, with an artist that they may not necessarily like, that may not necessarily be top of mind. But once the publicist pitch them, then they're like, oh, this is actually cool for X, Y, and Z, or this artist would be cool for this stage or this performance, or maybe, there's not a performance opportunity, but they present an award, or, maybe they do red carpet coverage. I think it's a good mix of the two, for sure.
Interesting. I've seen those interviews. What's his name? The late night show where he's sort of like sidekick, the big Mexican sort of sidekick. He goes to these shows and he gives everyone tequila shots. Uh,
Oh yeah, he's from Kimmel, right?
that's right, Kimmel.
Yeah,
Uh,
he's from Kimmel.
and then
And his name is like on the tip of my tongue, but I'm like blanking right now. But I know exactly who you're talking about. He's like everyone loves him.
yes.
Yeah.
And then in the video, sometimes he's yelling out the celebrity's name, and then I guess the celebrity doesn't have them in mind, and then they hear his name, he's just yelling out the name, and then they do like a beeline to him. I guess the celebrities seem to have like they can choose who they talk to, right? They can choose who they want to get interviewed by, but I guess the publicist just gives them recommendations.
I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, everything is their decision.
Hmm.
We can just give our like expert advice on something or but we're not in place to tell people you have to do this. Like this is mandatory. We're here to advise you and like tell you what we think is best just from our like experience or our expert opinion because this is what we do day in and day out and we're usually like super informed on what happens and so we're just here to like give recommendations honestly and like advise you and sometimes there's a lot of tug and war and back and forth because we really want to see these artists win or our clients win and they may not necessarily know how a certain moment could move the needle for them. And so it's our job to kind of educate them too and educate their team. And like I said, all conversations aren't just like, okay, if you advise that I do this, yes, I'm going to do it. No, sometimes it's like, okay, why should I do that? Or like, actually, I don't think that's for me. Like, it doesn't feel like a fit. And you work closely with them to make sure everyone's comfortable, but we're also like achieving our goals, like, and working towards, something bigger.
Got it. And like coming into the future, Cheyenne, what's your thoughts on podcasts? Because we saw with the last election, like Trump, he did just like a bunch of podcasts, and it seems like sort of the TV channels, outlets seem to be sort of falling to the wayside. Is podcast a new meta for sort of going on a campaign run?
Absolutely. There are so many cool podcasts. And, I think to your point, traditional media is just not as widespread as it used to be. And there are so many cool, new, creative ways to promote projects. And I think it's up to us as publicists to stay abreast of like those new trends and, those new platforms. And also, as those new platforms grow and they're being born, you have to like also kind of start building those like new relationships. And yeah, podcasts definitely play a huge part of like a press run or a press tour. And they're super important because like you said, a lot of people are listening to podcasts. Like more people are like listening to podcasts, I think in the mornings and on the trains and on, their flights or just on their commutes or in the evenings versus like sitting in front of a television and watching, someone doing a sit down interview.
Okay. When sort of an artist becomes really big, like say Drake or Beyonce, do they need a publicist? Because if they want to go on Rolling Stone, they can just message Rolling Stone because, he's Drake. If they want to go on Joe Rogan, he can just message Joe Rogan. When they're that big, where can the publicist come in? Because when you're that big, you can get access to anything you want yourself.
So I'm not speaking from a first-hand experience because I haven't worked with someone as big as a Beyonce or a Drake yet. Soon to come, hopefully. Yeah, fingers crossed. But they definitely 100% need a publicist because I think, as you get bigger, there are bigger fish to fry, as people say, or like, you have bigger problems and bigger projects that you're working on. And you may not necessarily do X, Y, and Z blogs or interviews, but there are just bigger things at play. You have bigger brand deals, bigger projects. You start getting into movies and you have collaborations with different like networks and contracts with different partners. And so a publicist is there to, kind of guide you through that and make sure the messaging is on point. And, sometimes, with big celebrities, there comes different points where, unfortunately, there's drama or something, maybe misconstrued. And so a publicist is the one to kind of like help, kind of craft that statement to kind of negate what may necessarily what could probably rather be something that's completely made up or just kind of figure out if you're working with someone on a Beyonce level, you don't want to do Beyonce doesn't have to do everything, but you want to make sure that she's still doing those right things, those big moments that feel like cultural, like big cultural moments, which is why she does the Super Bowl. And it's a publicist who is behind and working closely with the team for sure to like make those moments happen. And when you saw her at the Lion King premiere with her family with Blue, and like a publicist is the one to usually like facilitate and coordinate all of that and like make sure that those photos, no bad photos go out. Like you want to make sure you have approval on which photographers are taking pictures and you need to see them all. And like it's super important for, like I said, I think regardless of what level you're at, if you're have one song out and you're have 5,000 followers on Instagram versus someone as big as a Beyonce or Drake, as you mentioned. I think, or Kendrick Lamar, those people definitely need publicists.
See. Did things like TMZ, paparazzi change the landscape of things? Because all of a sudden you have these guys that are just going around taking photos of Justin Bieber, taking bad photos of him. And as a publicist, you can't do anything. And back in the days, I guess that wasn't an issue, but now you're having TMZ like film videos and conversations. And I guess as a publicist, you can sort of try to spin the narrative. But when there's a video of Justin Bieber attacking the videographer, you can't really control that as the publicist. You can't tell TMZ to stop, right?
I mean, you can tell them to stop, but that doesn't mean that they're going to stop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think, now we have social media. Back then, the tabloids were like crazy. I
Mm,
mean, I remember like when I was young and you would go to the grocery store with your parents and you
yes.
would, at checkout, it would be 10 to 12 magazines with Michael Jackson's like face and he's hiding and like, it's crazy, salacious like headlines and it's just a different era. Now we have social media where everyone has a phone and they can pull out their phones really quickly and, catch you in your pajamas or in your sweats coming out of a Whole Foods or running to grab a latte from Starbucks. It's just like people have more access to you because of social media and because of the phones. Whereas back in the day, you had to have a camera and like you sell your photos to different tabloids or whatever. But I think we forget like these people are human beings too. And they're not always going to be on and they're not always going to be having a good day. And, they may not always necessarily be nice. Like it's a very exhausting it can be a very exhausting and take a mental toll on you. And, if you're constantly being chased by paparazzi, it's dangerous, one. And, not saying any type of violence is justified or warranted, but like if you're a parent and someone is like chasing you with a camera and you have a kid, I may not necessarily be able to control how I react to you like invading my personal space, especially when you're around my child. Or like for instance, I saw a clip that's kind of went viral over the weekend of an event that was happening during Oscars weekend. And there was a man who was standing outside of this nice event, and he, in my opinion, he was harassing these different artists who were leaving the event. And the artist who I noticed who he, I guess he called himself joking, but it was a form of harassment because they don't have any type of security. They've asked to be left alone, yet you continue to like bother and chastise and poke at these artists. And I think people often forget that they're humans too. And like there was one clip when an artist like she kind of snapped back at him and told him no, like I'm putting my foot down. This is a no. And I just think people like that, there has to be some level of consequence or punishment for doing that. At the end of the day, like I said, they're not robots. These people are human beings with families and feelings and they choose to give their art to the world. And I think there has to be a certain like that should be sacred in my opinion. And I even said as far as this guy who was outside of this event, to me, he was, loitering like outside of this event and he was harassing these artists. I think, at some point his credentials should have been revoked and he should have been escorted off the property. Had he refused to leave, I think, someone should have like enforcement should have been involved, law enforcement, because you can't just get away with this type of like harassment. Like I think, there has to be some kind of boundaries in place for these artists for sure.
When you talked about the MJ, Michael Jackson sort of situation where he just had all this bad sort of slander on all these tabloids, if he had the best PR team in the world, could they have negated that?
I mean, I'm sure he had an amazing publicist. But sometimes I think there can be a media storm that takes place that's like, at this point it's pretty uncontrollable. And I think, at that time the media was definitely chasing him and I think that's part of the reason why he hid a lot too. And but when things get, uncontrollable at that level, I think it would be kind of difficult to kind of bring that level of craziness in or tone that level of craziness down in any capacity, to be honest. That's a different type of beast for sure. It's not like a bad moment happened and, we could let this blow over or like, oh, we don't have a statement. Like, and, we just kind of hide for 6 months. Michael Jackson was the biggest star in the world. And, it got to a level that I feel like was hard. It was a fire that just kept spreading like wildfire and just it was hard to attain.
What's your thoughts on the no statement, be silent for 6 months strategy? Like for example, someone I think of is who's the name of that actor that was in Marvel? He played sort of Kang, the black actor. And then I think he got into some legal case and then Marvel fired him. And then he just sort of disappeared for the last year, I guess. And I think I saw him in a trailer for an upcoming movie. Maybe you might
I'm
not
not
know.
sure. No, I'm
Okay.
not sure.
Um, I
It's
guess,
not
yeah.
like coming to me, rather. I'm probably no,
Mhm.
but at the moment it's not. Yeah.
What's your thoughts on the no statement, disappear for 6 months strategy?
I think, sometimes things are so wild and outlandish that it's like, you know what, I'm not even going to acknowledge this. I think it depends on like that's also a case by case basis on whether you want to acknowledge something or not. And sometimes things are so crazy and, out there that like you just have to, say something. I think a good example of that is like I saw in the news and like on TikTok, everyone's doing these like think pieces and all of these like opinionated videos on Mason Disick, Kourtney Kardashian's son. And like people were saying, oh, he has a son and he's like, I think 15 or 16, and they're hiding this like 1 year old baby or however old they said the baby was. And, I think as a mother, like, mother bear, you're protective. And she was so tired of people like pushing this false narrative about her kid at the end of the day. Like he's still a child, he's a minor. And so she went into protective mode and she released a statement. I don't know if it was just she just posted something on her Instagram story or whatever, but I think she just wanted to like dead it. Like this is not true. This is a child we're talking about. Like there's nothing that we're hiding. Like let's just keep in mind that this is a child and he doesn't like the spotlight. Can you guys respect that? So I think, like I said, it's a case by case basis.
Yeah, I think I was seeing some like people on TikTok saying how the whole Alabama, I don't know, like she's popping up and there's beef with her. I don't really understand what's happening, but all that sort of storm is used to distract everyone from the Mason Disick having a kid because I'm not seeing that on my TikTok. And I was like, huh, are they intentionally creating that storm to divert our attention? What's your thoughts, and does that happen? Is that like a real strategy?
I'm doubtful of that. And like, I think no one's gonna release a statement like that if it were true. Like they're not about to hide a baby for 18 years. Like this is a big family and like they have a lot of babies. It's probably just such a people literally make things up and put stories together and like it catches on and people just run with it. It's like insane how that like happens these days. Like it blows my mind how like something could like completely be untrue. And people like speak about it as if it's facts, like if it's written down in stone somewhere. And it's like, this is absolutely insane. So, yeah, I don't think that, I doubt that that's the case here for sure.
Another sort of storm that I'm recalling is the Smith family. Will Smith, Jada Smith, um, like there must have been a publicist that was like, hey, we can't release this podcast. We can't release this conversation because it's so personal. Did they just not listen to their publicist? Was the publicist not there? Did the publicist fail at their job in that scenario? What do you think happened PR wise in that situation?
So the Smith family, rather, you mentioned a podcast. I'm not familiar actually. I don't
I think
think.
the conversation between Jada and Will and talking about Jada talking about how maybe she had a relationship with Jaden's friend or something, and like that conversation. I don't know if that rings a bell.
Was it the Red Table Talk?
Yes, that's it.
Okay. I mean, that's a show that has a big team behind it. I think like even Meta, Facebook was behind that show. And I mean, they had partners, producers. I think it was a collective decision of everyone to kind of sit there. And I think, actually, a lot of families probably have similar situations, and it was probably very beneficial for people to hear them be so transparent about it in front of their kids. And I mean, they lived it. And so I think they were just kind of ready to tell their truth. And I definitely watched, and it was all over the news. It was a powerful story. And I think, it may not be necessarily what some would call a normal situation, but it was their truth. And I'm always like happy and proud of like people who can like live in their truth and be vulnerable and transparent, especially with the public. And they live such very public lives that maybe they felt like it was just time to kind of put this out there. And like, there were also so many kind of rumors that they probably just wanted to dead the rumors and tell their truth.
Mm, that makes total sense. And then I guess, Cheyenne, has there been any cool sort of campaigns that you've worked on that you can share the behind the scenes on, like obviously what we saw as an audience, but what you guys did behind the scenes to make it appear so?
I mean, so many amazing projects and campaigns that I've been a part of. I guess one that like sticks out to me is Jessie Reyez, who is like, I love Jessie Reyez so much. She was like one of the first artists that I worked with at Island when I was at Island Records that I was super excited about. She's so talented, and she, quickly became critically acclaimed. And, we just had some amazing moments. And it was amazing, like working the campaign and working closely with the team and seeing, her growth over the years, and her growth not only like as a performer, as an artist, but just like her open up to like new ideas and experimenting more with certain things, and eventually being Grammy nominated, and working with her and walking with her on that carpet. And like it just felt like all of our work was paying off. And I'm still like super tight with Jessie, and I recently saw her. She was on tour with Janae Aiko, and I saw her here in New York. So it was nice to catch up with her then. But that campaign is like one of the campaigns that I feel the most proud about, just because I feel like we kind of touched all the markers, at that particular point in her career, as far as big moments that we could make happen, and a diverse like range of PR, and just like building the awareness and her visibility, and really focusing on her as like the next, at that time, the next artist to watch. It was a very exciting time for sure.
What
Oh my
did
God,
that?
I want to stop saying for sure. I've said that like three times. I have to like stop saying that.
I have so many things I sometimes just repeat
Yeah, I'm like, now that I'm doing
subconsciously.
this, I'm like, I've done that three times.
I didn't even notice until you brought it up. So it's definitely
Yeah,
not a
I'm
big deal
done with
because I
that.
didn't
I'm like,
recognize. With the Jessica Reyes campaign, like what did that look like? How long was the
Jessie
campaign?
Reyez.
Jessie Reyes,
Yep.
um, how long was it? What did it look like? What was the strategy looking back?
So, I mean, it was the entire time I was at Island, so about 3.5, 4 years. I mean, of course, she was at Island before I was there, and so someone else like was her publicist at that, her label publicist at that time. But yeah, no, I think as far as strategy, it was really to position her as like this artist to watch. Like she was next up, and people were really investing in the music, and she was different, had a different sound, and her voice was different, and she was super like cool and grounded, and she would wear chucks and like denim shorts and like an oversized shirt, and like pull her hair in a ponytail with a scrunchie and just like, go out there on the stage with her guitar and like kick ass. And I think, a lot of women kind of men loved it and women. Like I think they just found her to be kind of this like inspiring artist. And at her shows, things would like they would go crazy when she came out on the stage. And so it was just an exciting time. And like I said, I feel like it was one of those campaigns where we were very careful about, where we placed her and what she did. And we hit all of those like markers that you want to hit for a new artist that you're trying to position as, the next artist to watch.
Talking about placements and timing, what's an example of a placement and timing and why you did that intentionally?
A placement and timing. Can you elaborate a little more?
Yeah. I guess like what did you guys do to sort of emphasize her as this new up and coming artist with a new sound? What were specific moves or placements that you did for that?
So I think, Jessie is Colombian, Canadian. And so it's making sure that you kind of touch all of those areas, like the Latin press or also the Canadian press and then the US press and making sure that it felt like a full campaign and touched on just like naturally, who she was. Like she speaks Spanish, but her family's from Colombia, but she's also like Canadian and the music is resonating in the States and she, spent a lot of time here. And so I think it was making sure, that all of those moments were in place. And then also building a full like campaign. So making sure those like critically acclaimed, really cerebral, smart pieces were being written about her. People who were like really passionate about music and new artists and really sat with the music because she, wrote about subjects from like feminism and, she was a self-empowerment and she kind of was in a place where she would say things that like a lot of women, may not necessarily would have been so forward about and she would just say it. And I think that was admirable and like inspiring for a lot of women. And she kind of thrived and did really well in that space.
Got it. And Cheyenne, what did it look like behind the scenes? Were you reaching out to Canadian outlets, Latino outlets, being like, hey, I represent Jessie and she's new and up and coming. You probably already know her. This is what we'd like to talk about. Are you interested? And then you're just going through your contacts, doing that with as many outlets that fit that narrative as possible. Is that what it looks like behind the scenes?
Yeah, that's exactly kind of what it looks like behind the scenes. And if you're at a label and depending on the artist, normally there's multiple publicists involved sometimes. So, you have an international publicist or a publicist who focuses like, a lot of publicists we can do it all. Like it's just like you can do the international PR, but if you're in-house somewhere, a lot of times there are different departments who focus on things. So you kind of have to like let them do their job, but that's exactly how it works. And I don't want to say, but just work together as a unit and a team to make sure that, if you don't have a contact here, if you have a stronger contact, it's no ego thing. You hit them. The goal is to like, it's the artist to make sure that we're doing our best job and putting our best foot forward for the artist and making sure that we're locking in these looks and achieving our goals. Like at the end of the day, that's all that matters. Like your ego's out of the way and you just want to do the good work.
I go ahead and join a sort of PR firm and no one knows who Andy is, how can the PR firm, I guess, have me help? Do I get access to the email list? But even if I do, I guess I'm just like an employee, but maybe I have access to their at, company name, and maybe that helps me get through the door. What does it usually look like? Do you get to leverage these sort of agencies' sort of contacts, or do you have to build your own?
I think a mix of both. I think if you are hired somewhere, I mean, they're obviously hiring you because they believe in you and they trust you. And, obviously a lot of these things are super confidential and like a lot of these lists have, that or Rolodex or contacts that people have. These are the contacts that a lot of these people have had for years. And so this isn't something that they just sat at home and built overnight. And so I think the more you work with someone who's more senior than you and like they kind of guide you and start introducing you to people, you naturally start to like build your own relationships and build your own like contact or database.
And then I guess as a freelancer, when you go off on your own, are you able to, or are you allowed to sort of pitch old clients that you've worked with, that you had great relationships with, and be like, hey, I'm going independent. Any chance you would want to sort of still work with me? Does that happen, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean that's happened to me, as I've been like freelancing, consulting. I've worked with a couple of artists who, were signed to labels that I've worked for previously. It definitely happens. I think it depends on, whatever setup they have internally at the label and, your relationship with that artist or their management. But it's coming.
That makes sense. I know something you mentioned earlier. You talked about the importance of like having a good subject line. Any subject line tips? Anything that you found to work really well with subject lines? Because I'm guessing producers, authors, they get tons of emails.
Yeah, I think, catchy things or like eye-grabbing names, it depends if there's a big status, like a big stat that's come out, like number one, Billboard artist or six-time Grammy Award winning, X, Y, and Z. Just make it as catchy as possible. Or if there's like a big, if they're affiliated with someone, like maybe tying their name into like if they're affiliated with someone who may have a bigger audience or like maybe more of a household name than the client you're pitching, like using that as a tool.
When like someone like Beyonce goes on like a massive sort of campaign run, going on all these sort of late night shows, is a publicist coordinating with the assistant to figure out the scheduling, the timing, getting access to Beyonce's schedule to know when she's free, when she's not? Yeah, how does that all combine?
Yeah, you work very closely with the team, like so her immediate team or management, her if agent probably, like everyone kind of works together to figure out the schedule and figure out what works best.
Interesting. So, like, let's say the publicist is talking to the producer, Jimmy Fallon. The producer would then go back to the publicist with some availabilities, and the publicist will relay it to Beyonce's team, and then she'll wait to go back. So it will sort of be this sort of this
It's a
job. Yeah.
chain, yeah. Yeah. That's exactly how it works. Yes.
Wow. Yeah, because there's going to be delays, but I guess you just have to be really quick at it to sort of make it happen. And
And
if
you have to,
things
yeah, and
change,
sometimes you have to chase too. Like, I need an
yeah.
answer on this ASAP.
Yeah. Someone that I've been sort of a big fan of is Kanye. And recently he's been going on like a Twitter rant. And I think I've seen people talk about how every time there's an album release, he goes on, he does a bunch of crazy things. He gets a bunch of attention. And it's sort of like I don't know the term they use, but it's like a PR run, but he does it in his own way. What's your thoughts on what Ye's been doing to garner attention with every sort of launch he has?
Okay. I think some things are just completely unacceptable. And like, I think over the years, Kanye provided us with some amazing music and, he's been fashion inspiration to so many people and just big moments in culture that he's been a part of that, some people it's hard to accept some of the like wild things that he's, been doing or like tweets and products. I mean, forbid the products that he's, pushing. But I think, some things aren't worth the publicity. And I'm doubtful that, there's a team that's behind this. I think it's probably just something that he is pushing himself.
Yeah, that makes sense. One thing I do want to tie it back to the very beginning. You talked about sort of wanting to go into PR. because you're a fan of music, fashion, film. Now that you've been in PR for the last 10 years, has that been the case? Were you able to merge all your sort of passions into one? What's your sort of take on PR now that you've been in it for the last 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's definitely changed the way we do PR, and like it has changed so much. And like I said earlier, I think it's our job to adapt to those changes, and also just it's a be a constant like learner, and like constantly educate ourselves, and try to diversify our skill set as much as possible. So like reading and taking courses and things like that. Like I've been recently doing like free like marketing courses online just to kind of like sharpen my like marketing tools, and becoming more savvy on AI, which is like a big part of so many different businesses now. And just like, trying to become like more versed on that, and like how it could be beneficial to, you know, certain things that we do. Um, but I feel like, yeah, over the years, I definitely have, I think, I'm thankful for the agency background, because we weren't just working, with musicians. We were working in film and TV. We were working with brands, working across the like gamut. And so I think, I'm thankful for that and those relationships that I started building early on, because it definitely gives me a little bit more uniqueness as a publicist, because I do have that background and I do have those relationships. So I'm thankful that I am able to use, all those relationships and kind of live in all these worlds, from like music, fashion, art, culture, because it's just something that like I naturally do in my everyday life. It's not a character that I've built. Like I'm actually really passionate about these things. And, on the weekends, I'm at art shows and music shows, and I'm listening to music all the time. And I'm, just reading up on different things and trends that are happening. It's just something that like it's authentic to who I am.
Talking about fashions, you were talking about how back in the day, around 2010, with the bow ties, everyone was wearing loafers, blazers. It's interesting. It feels like that's sort of coming back. The whole loafers, that old money sort of quiet luxury sort of look is coming
Yeah,
back
the
in
quiet
trend.
luxury.
Yeah. I guess, is it better to sort of follow and be ahead of the trends, or find what you like and just stick to that for 50 years and know that it's going to go out of style, but it's going to come back in style? Because like the fact that things cycle back, I'm like, is there even a point sort of like changing styles if it's going to cycle back eventually?
I mean, this is just my opinion, but I think, everyone's different. And I think trends can be fun for the moment, but it's always nice to have like a classic wardrobe, like pieces that, you feel stand the test of time, and like you hold on to those pieces. I like to like buy simple statement quality like pieces that I feel like transcend trends, and not like be super into like, all the like fast fashion trends that are happening. It's just me personally, but I know some people like to experiment more, and like I do experiment, but to an extent. But yeah, everything comes back. I mean, bell bottoms. I mean, look at Kendrick. Those pants, like they sold out, and like everyone was talking about his pants at the Super Bowl. So, I mean, everything come or I don't know if they were bell bottoms, but they were more like wide leg. Um, yeah, they everything comes back. It's just a cycle.
Let me just jump to the last two questions I usually wrap all these sort of interviews with. One, any recent discoveries that you've been implementing to your day-to-day life, Cheyenne?
Recent discoveries that I've been. I it's not recent discoveries, but like every day I've found myself just like doing more research of like how to like come up with more creative campaigns, or like how to sharpen my skill set, or like what I could do that like could, help me stand out from the next publicist, or, what skill could I learn that could help me stand out? Because like I said, I think, with everything changing and, technology constantly advancing, it's like our jobs to move forward as the times move forward. So I'm always just like researching and reading and trying to build like even more diverse like list of contacts and just trying to figure and also like bouncing ideas off of fellow like colleagues and publicist friends and media friends just to, there may be something that I'm not thinking of that like after a conversation it could like spark a bulb and I'm like, oh, this is like super cool. Like maybe I should explore X, Y, and Z. So I think every day I'm just trying to like be a student and learn more.
I love that. Last question. Any sort of personal goals over the next 6 months, not work related?
Personal goals, not work related. Absolutely. I have been trying to, in the mornings, like before I like get out of bed, just show more gratitude, just like, and just be thankful for like the small things and kind of say them out loud. And it's really grounding and just like a nice way to start the day. I've been focused like more on like wellness and health. So, staying consistent with workouts and just different exercises, whether physically, mentally, spiritually, practicing those like more consistently, being more present in the moment with my family and friends and like taking really digesting those moments and the time that I spend with my loved ones. And then also, lastly, I mean, I have so many like goals and things that I'm working towards. I think lastly would be like patience. I'm not the most patient, and so I have to like really, and you know what, I've been doing a great job at this actually, but it's just it takes practice. And so when I feel the urge or like that feeling that I get when I'm being like antsy or impatient, I just kind of have to check myself and kind of realize that, not everything is so urgent and it's okay. Like take a breath and some things are beyond our control. And so just realizing like, if there are things that I can't control and kind of like letting it go more. And if I can control it, being more proactive and trying to get ahead of things before, it becomes uncontrollable. I
Love
think
it.
those are like the biggest goals that I have for the year.
That's awesome. Love it. Cheyenne, where can people get more of you?
More of me. I hope to like do more podcasts. This is my first, like I've done like virtual panels and like in-person panels and interviews and things before, but this is my first podcast and I'm super excited about this. So hopefully like more podcast interviews, more in-person panels, my social media at Cheyenne Beam on pretty much everything. Yeah, and if you heard anything that you have any more questions on or that felt inspiring to you, like definitely reach out. I'm always down to connect with people who um, are in this industry and aren't in this industry. So, yeah,
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time, Shannon. It was a pretty long podcast. I enjoyed learning about what it's like behind the scenes. Just as a viewer, like I'm just so curious. And then like you were
yeah,
able to sort of really share the insights, and it was fascinating to sort of hear the world that you come from. So thank you so much for sharing it on today's show.
of course. Thanks for having me. This was so fun. And, we could go on for hours about this stuff, but I hope that I like at least drop some kind of like insight or gems during this interview. Yeah, it was like almost 2 hours, right? Yeah.
You most definitely did. Guys, if you've made it this far, hopefully you guys got a ton of value from it. It was a great episode. Please message me, let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you guys next week on another episode. Peace.